Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to your Thursday edition of the Post Up with David Grubb. I, of course, am David Grubb right here on Boot Crew Media. Today, we're going to look at a few things. You know, there's been a lot of trade talk lately. Of course, it's the offseason. That's what you get in the NBA. So we'll talk about some potential trades that have been talked about between the Pelicans and the Portland Trail Blazers. We're going to talk about Yves Missi. We're going to talk about some things on the court for the Pelicans that they need to improve if they really want to become an elite team in the NBA. So we're going to start with this a couple of potential deals that have been discussed regarding the New Orleans Pelicans and the Portland Trail Blazers. One I think is pretty feasible. The other one I think it is not the best move for the Pelicans. All right, I'll start with the one that I don't like, and that's the Pelicans swapping Zion Williamson for DeAndre Ayton and some picks. I don't like that deal. I think DeAndre Ayton is already overpaid as a center, though he was the number one pick in the NBA draft. He's overpaid. He's inconsistent, though he has had a lot of good games against the Pelicans. I don't find him to be the kind of player that if you're going to give up a potential player who can win multiple games in the playoffs for you to a guy who needs a lot of support, a good defender, a decent rebounder, and can be an offensive threat. But on a nightly basis, is this team built to make the maximum of what his abilities are? And I would say no. I don't think it's built to bring the best out of DeAndre Ayton, who thrived is mostly around a team that had a lot of veterans when the Suns went to the championship, a team that was led by Chris Paul that season. So you haven't seen the kind of production out of DeAndre Ayton that you would like from a number one pick. Certainly the Pelicans would get some assets if you're talking about number one pick from the Blazers. But again, I think you can get similar deals to that for Zion Williamson later in the season after you find out what you have if you're Joe Dumars. And I think that, again, time and time I've said that I believe that Joe Dumars is going to find out what he has in Zion. He wants to see this up close and personal before he makes any determination on the future of Zion Williamson. I don't think he's married to Zion. I don't think he has to see this entire 3 years remaining on his contract through, but I do believe that he wants to find out if Zion can remain committed to winning. We saw a committed player last year. We see the kind of production that Zion Williamson has. When you talk about 70 games in his career of 25 points, and then shooting better than 65% from the floor. Like, that's the most in the NBA by far. So for players under 25. So when you look at that kind of production, he's more than double the next closest player when it comes to that. His impact on a nightly basis, his efficiency on a nightly basis, you can't give up that kind of gravity, especially if you want a player like Trey Murphy III to thrive. You just can't give that up just yet. So I think that deal doesn't make much sense. Now, if you go to the one that I think is a little bit more interesting, the Pelicans would give up CJ McCollum, Kelly Olynyk, next year's top 4 predicted pick from Indiana, and a couple of seconds in 2031 for Anthony Simons and Robert Williams. Now, I like this deal for 2 reasons. Number one, you get 2 veteran players off your roster who are not part of your long-term plans. For CJ McCollum, he goes back to Portland, and he may not want to be in Portland, but if he stays, he and Olynyk make a couple of veterans that could help a young team grow. If it doesn't work in Portland, they can still move CJ, who would be in the last year of his contract, to another team that he could help. The same with Olynyk. So I think that's good flexibility for the Blazers, and you're only giving up a single number one pick. The return of Anthony Simons, a guy who has proven that he can score in this league, has averaged 20 points per game twice in the last 3 seasons, has shot typically around 40% from 3-point range throughout his career, and at 25 fits your timeline with Zion Williamson and Trey Murphy. Gives you a dynamic scoring presence in your backcourt, which is what the Pelicans have sorely needed, and the ability to knock down threes. He's a volume 3-point shooter with more than 8 attempts per game over the last 3 seasons. So Simons gives you athleticism in the backcourt. He gives you scoring ability. He gives you 3-point shooting. So all of those things are good for the Pelicans. His contract is reasonable at $27 million, and he is in the last year of his deal, but I think you can you'd be willing to take that deal on with him if he has a really good season. If he proves to you that he can remain a 20-plus point scorer and shoot nearly 40 from three, if he can do that, I think that's worth the investment rather than going out into the market and trying to buy that player. The same for Williams. Williams, you're getting a distressed asset because he's only played 60 games once in the last 4 years. But you know that if he is healthy, he can be a good rim defender and he can be a good rebounder. So if you take a guy like Williams, who is also in the last year of his deal, it's a very low risk, high reward option. If he plays okay, if he shows you that he can be a dependable backup, you can get him for less than what he's currently being paid. If he shows you that he's really good and he can still be healthy, you still don't have the incentive to sign him to a long-term deal because he's only proven for 1 year that he can stay healthy. But you'd have the leverage for him to say, you've played well with us. We can sign you to a 2-year deal that keeps you here. You're not jumping around in your career. You've got a stable place. Here is our backup center behind Yves Missi. It also takes away that need per se to draft a center in the first round of this year's draft and allows you to get more flexible with what you want to do. Do you want to get somebody on the perimeter, or do you want to make moves with that pick because you may no longer feel obligated to take a center at in the top 7? So I think those are that's an interesting option. I think it's an intriguing option, and I think it's if it really were on the table, I would take it. I don't know if you might disagree. Leave your comments below. All right. Yves Missi, we want to give Yves Missi his due. Certainly one of the bright spots in a very dark season for the New Orleans Pelicans last year. On Wednesday, the 21st pick in last year's draft was named to the NBA's all-rookie second team. Missi was the second lowest drafted player to make that team behind Grizzlies rookie Jalen Wells, who was taken in the second round. Missi, as you know, thrown into the starting lineup very early, looked awful in preseason, looked lost at times, didn't have a great summer league either. So it seemed like he wasn't going to be much of a factor for this season. Instead, he ends up responding with 14 double-doubles, which was second amongst rookies, just behind Zach Edey, and he grabbed 10 or more rebounds in a game 26 times. Among rookies last year, he ranked in the top 5 in field goal percentage, free throw attempts, offensive rebounding, rebounding average, and block shots. Led the Pelicans in games played, in starts, offensive rebounds, total rebounds, and block shots, and on his way to becoming the 8th New Orleans rookie to make an all-rookie team. The rest of the group, it's a mixed bag as far as how their careers went. Chris Paul, Darren Collison, both went on to long careers. Obviously, Anthony Davis again, Buddy Hield still in the league, didn't have a long tenure in New Orleans, moved on as part of the DeMarcus Cousins trade, and Zion Williamson all have been first-team members. Marcus Thornton and Herb Jones made the second team. Marcus Thornton, another player that probably the Pelicans, the Hornets at that time, gave up on too quickly. Herb Jones, a staple in this team right now. So what does Missi need to do to build on this season? I think first and foremost, he's got to work on his hands. He's got to be able to catch the basketball in traffic. He's got to be able to finish without bobbling the basketball. He needs to be better in catching the basketball and just get stronger in the post. And that starts with the fundamentals of getting better hands and working on his footwork as well. His finishing around the basket. We saw at times that he had some moves, but it's that it takes him so long to get into them. You can see the wheels turning. It's not natural yet. He doesn't need to be Akeem Olajuwon, but what he needs to be able to do is execute a simple turn over the shoulder jump hook. He needs to be able to finish quickly out of the dunker spot, and he needs to be able to score off his offensive rebounds, which he was a great offensive rebounder as a rookie, but he needs to be able to finish those plays on a second effort. A lot of that had to do with his just reticence to finish above the rim. And you saw how many alley-oops he struggled to finish. That goes back to his hands, but it's also his timing on his jumps sometimes was a bit off. He jumped either from too far away. You couldn't tell if he wanted to dunk it or lay it up. That indecisiveness, just go ahead and go with your first reaction and finish the play. He has to be less hesitant when it comes to finishing around the basket. His overall strength. He is a light 220-pounder at the center position. He needs to gain at least 15 more pounds of muscle, particularly in the lower body, so he can hold his position in the post. It was easy to score on Yves Missi if you were posting him up. He gave up second chances. He gave up a lot of scoring on the interior. Part of that's on the overall inability of the Pelicans to defend, but he's got to be better and more physical at that center spot if he wants to have a long career in the NBA. And then there's the little things. How does he set screens? He's got to be a good, solid screener. And he's got to be able to be a dependable role man. He's got to be in the right spot at the right time. Just awareness of when to pass out of double teams or when to kick the ball out when he doesn't have an offensive opportunity. He's got to be better at those things, the little things that come with experience and time on the court. But this offseason, he needs to be really focused on watching film. And I think, the more he does the simple things, focuses and concentrates on a couple of really solid improvements, particularly finishing the pick and roll, working on his strength, and being able to finish out of the dunker spot. If he can improve those things significantly, I think he becomes a Clint Capella-like figure for the New Orleans Pelicans. He can't do that without adding all of those things, though. All right. One of the big problems that we've had with the New Orleans Pelicans over years is how should the Pelicans play? What is New Orleans Pelicans basketball? At times it's tried to be really offensive minded. And I think the best that we saw, under Alvin Gentry, the team that got to the second round of the playoffs, what you saw that year was a team that was aggressive at all times offensively, had a great defender in Anthony Davis who could erase mistakes and could cover a lot of ground. You had a great point of attack defender in Rajon Rondo who understood what to do. Drew Holiday, again, an all NBA level defender on the perimeter. And you could cover for the Pelicans a real lack of defensive ability for Nikola Mirotic at that time. And, of course, whomever was playing the other forward position on a night-to-night basis. They didn't really have a dependable, whether it was just that rotating circle of Solomon Hill, Dante Cunningham, guys like that. Just you didn't really have a great small forward, but that team was able to create enough defense to be able to generate offensive looks. I think that the first thing that's the most obvious for this Pelicans team is that it plays better when it's fast, particularly Zion Williamson. Last year, his overall pace was a 103.3, a slight uptick to 103.49 in Pelicans wins. The year before, he was the fastest starter during that 49-win season at 101.4. No other starter hit 100 last year. Okay, so Zion is playing at a faster pace than his teammates at all times when he's on the floor, but between the starting lineup at all times. There have been some reserves who have been right there with him, but typically Zion is playing the fastest pace of the Pelicans regulars. And it's gone down since his career started. Under Alvin Gentry, Zion's pace was over 106 in wins and over 107 in losses. So he was playing at a very fast pace. Even under Stan Van Gundy, the pace was 103.3, and he was still the highest amongst all the starters. So you want to make sure that you have Zion Williamson as many times as you can in the open floor, in transition. And what does that require? To get the Pelicans moving that aggressively on the offensive side of the floor, they've got to have rebounding. They've got to have rim protection, and they've got to make steals. So last season, the Pelicans were 8th in steals per game, but 26th in defensive rebounding. You add on top of that, they allowed 66% shooting within 3 feet of the basket. When you allow teams to make those kinds of shots, you're constantly taking the ball out of the net, and that does not allow you to get out in transition. And they don't have the kind of guards who are able to allow them to run off of makes. You see a commitment like teams from like the Indiana Pacers or a team like Oklahoma City who will run off makes or misses. But you've got to have the kind of guards who can advance the ball quickly and wings who are going to spread out and create space on the floor. The Pelicans have not had that. They've got to upgrade in the post and be better defensively, and have to be better at point of attack defense. We talked about that when the best teams for the Pelicans or the Hornets. You go back to the Chris Paul Hornets. He was a great defender at the top of the perimeter. The guys around him, and then you had a Tyson Chandler on the back line defending the team. The Pelicans don't have that right now. And they didn't really have that athleticism with Jonas Valanciunas. You didn't really have that athleticism on the back end with Steven Adams. You didn't have it with Derek Favors. You tried to get it with Jackson Hayes, and he just wasn't committed to being a basketball player. So that mistake sets you back in trying to find that player, and you've not identified him yet. I don't think Yves Missi is ready for that yet, and that's why you see the Pelicans interested in a Common Malawak. So teams also shot 48% overall against the Pelicans, second worst in the league. if you're going to be that bad defensively, and like the New York Knicks were not a great defensive team this year, but they were elite offensively. And the Pelicans also are not that. So you look at this team, you thought that you were bringing in DeJounte Murray, a point guard who could give you pace, who could create for others. And certainly DeJounte had a lot of big assist games, but he turned the ball over frequently, and he didn't really push the tempo until Zion Williamson got back. What you want to see is a commitment to running no matter who's on the floor. You have to play the same way for 48 minutes, especially during the regular season. In the postseason, you want to adjust for the situations, obviously. But in the regular season, the most successful teams are who they are 24/7. The Golden State Warriors play the same offense, whether it's the starters or the reserves. The Indiana Pacers are going to run no matter who's on the floor. The New York Knicks are going to push the tempo no matter who's on the floor. The Boston Celtics are going to shoot a lot of threes no matter who's on the floor. The Pelicans have to be committed from 1 to 12 to some offensive principles, and you need to see them executed on a nightly basis. I think one of the biggest criticisms of Willie Green is that he's talked about the team increasing its pace. He's talked about the team becoming better shooters, but there hasn't seemed to be a translation from his words to the actions of his players. That has to happen. The interior scoring has to get better. The Pelicans were just 61% at the rim, and that put them in the bottom 5 of the league. They were one of the worst teams at finishing drives at shooting 44.7% on their drives. Even during the 49-win season, the Pelicans ranked in the bottom half of the league in finishing their drives. They've been in the lower third of the league in paint touches and field goal percentage in the paint. You've got to be able to finish around the basket, and the Pelicans have not done that. So they've got to improve that going into this season. And that means you need better interior scorers. Who was able to score in the post last year? Zion Williamson is not a traditional post scorer, so he has to finish inside, typically on facing up. Yves Missi was not a back to the basket scorer, and when he did score, he only averaged around 9 points per game, so he wasn't giving you high level offensive production. Karlo Makovic is not a post scorer. He's a great scorer in transition and an athletic finisher above the rim, but can't really score with his back to the basket late in quarters. And though increasingly we've seen guards in the low post, none of the Pelicans guards are suited for that kind of game. It's a lot of face-up shooters in that group. So you're not getting the offensive versatility in the post to give you an advantage there, where other teams have either a big guard who can take smaller guards down into the block or a legitimate post presence. Lastly, let's look at the championship characteristics of teams and what's been common for the teams that have won the championship or have been in a position to compete for it. Number one, elite defense. This past season, the top 14 defenses made the postseason and 18 of the top 20. The top 5 best defenses averaged more than 54 wins apiece. So you've got to be elite defensively if you want to be a contender for the NBA title. Oklahoma City, best defense in the league. Boston Celtics, top 5 defense. Cleveland Cavaliers, top 10 defense. Those are the teams that you saw win 50 plus 60 games this season. You have to be elite defensively. When it comes to the three-pointer, accuracy is more important than volume. Of the top 10 teams in attempts last year, 5 of those 10 had losing records. Again, 5 of the top 10 teams in three-point attempts had losing records, and that group of 10 averaged just over 42 wins. So you're barely breaking even of those teams that were at the top of the league in attempts. The top 10 in accuracy, in three-point accuracy, 9 of those 10 had winning records this past season. And that group averaged almost 53 wins per team. So you're talking about a difference of 10 wins, of more than 10 wins between three-point attempts and three-point accuracy. The Pelicans were just 36.7% on their catch and shoot threes last year. That was a significant drop from 38.6 in the 49-win season. The 3 more important for the Pelicans in trying to get to some artificial number, whether that's 35, whether it's 40, whether it's 50, the Pelicans have to make the 3 just a natural part of the offense. There should not be quarters that go by when the Pelicans have 1 3-point attempt. There shouldn't be minutes and minutes and minutes that go by where the Pelicans don't attempt a 3. They need more plays to orchestrate threes. One of the things that I've harped on consistently with this team is their ability to take and make corner threes. The easiest shot in basketball. You're supposed to take that shot. And the Pelicans typically get outshot on corner threes year in and year out. That's a problem. It is not a regular and natural part of the offense. That is more important than trying to get 43s per game. The Pelicans' record last season, when they made 15 or more three-pointers, 10-8. For as bad as they were all season, when they made 15 threes, 10-8. The rest of the season, of course, 11-53. That's how important it is for them to make these shots. Number 3, the stars got to be stars. Zion Williamson has to play up his potential. Trey Murphy III has to play up to his potential. If you ever get DeJounte Murray back, whenever you do, he has to play up to his potential. These are players who are all-star or all-star adjacent, and you need them to be at the top of the league. It's very rare that a champion doesn't have multiple all-stars on board. At least 4 has been the norm. At least 4 current or former all-stars on your roster when you win a championship. It's going to be a little bit different this year for the Knicks or the Pacers or the Timberwolves, whomever. The Timberwolves, I believe, the Timberwolves have 4 all-stars, current or former, in Gobert, Anthony Edwards, Mike Conley, and I think Mike Conley's been an all-star. Yeah, I believe so. Mike Conley and Julius Randle. So they have 4 there, but it hasn't been typical. The Oklahoma City Thunder doesn't have 4 current or former all-stars. So you have things are starting to change this league, but you need your stars to play like stars. Number 4, home court advantage. This should be simple and easy to understand. You've got to win your games at home. The Pelicans' home record under Willie Green the last 4 years, 81-82. A 49.6% winning percentage at home. That has to improve. You have to be a 55+% winning team at home. The Pelicans consistently have struggled at home. Only 2 winning records in the last 4 years when they've in their home games. And last year they were obviously abysmal at home. The last part, of course, is health. The Pelicans last season, 365 player games missed. That put them 4th in the NBA. But the big part for them, they were 2nd in total salary missed. So when the Pelicans players missed games, as you know, it was the Brandon Ingrams, it was the starters, the Zion Williamsons, the Herb Jones, the DeJounte Murray. So the Pelicans not only missed games, they had their most important players miss games. You have to be healthy. You have to get a lot of luck. You've seen it in this postseason, stars going down and it affecting whether or not their teams could advance, particularly Stephen Curry and Jason Tatum. You've got to stay healthy. That's an easy one. But those are the components typically that you find from year to year. Most of them, it makes a lot of sense, obviously, but I think it's how you get to those numbers that's so important. It's how you arrive at them. And like I said, for the threes, it's about making it natural, making it a part of the offense on a night-to-night basis. Home court advantage, of course. You got to take those games seriously. You have to win those games at home. And I think a lot of it's been the Pelicans' inability to close, obviously, or to come from behind. And that's a sign of a mediocre team. You want to be great? Start winning your home games. All right. That's going to do it for today. I'll be back next week on Monday. So y'all have a great weekend. Make sure you make sure you subscribe, make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss an episode of the Post Up. You can follow me on social media at DM Grub on Twitter, on Instagram. You can also find me on TikTok and Blue Sky. So give me your comments and your feedback below. I always appreciate it. And we'll see what we got on Monday. What's the latest with the Pelicans? If there's trade rumors, we'll talk about those. If there's draft news, we'll talk about those. So stay tuned. And thank you so much for tuning in each and every day.